there's a lot of anger in the world right now. And I've been thinking a lot about this because it's made me sad. It's given me hope. There's a lot of different emotions I've been going through. I don't know if you've been going through the same thing. But what I remembered is that, I first found out that I had been clinically depressed since I was about 5 years old. And I remember that my parents, first of all, my best friend died when I was 17. And then my parents moved us from our home in Massachusetts to Las Vegas, Nevada, which certainly didn't help things at all. And I remember I went through just a couple of really tough years. And then when I hit 21, I decided that I was going to try to meet some like-minded people in Las Vegas. And so I joined the National Organization for Women, which was considered very radical back then. But I figured it would be a good place to meet intelligent women and find some friends. And what happened was I got really worked up about getting the Equal Rights Amendment passed. Now, it never happened, but I, picketed, I lobbied at the Nevada legislature. I did a lot of different things. And when I look back on that time in my life, I was angry. I was really angry. But you know what? I didn't feel as depressed. Anger is a fuel. And so one of the things that I know is that if you're depressed, the best thing to do is go from depression to anger. But here's the problem. People would rather we be depressed than angry. We're just much more manageable when we're depressed. When we're angry, people don't exactly know what to do with us. And so it's important to know that anger, although it doesn't feel good, it feels better than depression. And here's why. When I got really worked up about the equal rights for women, I felt like I was doing something. When I was lobbying, when I was picketing, when I was writing letters, when I was walking precincts so that my candidates could get elected, all of that action made me feel like there was hope. And that's one of the things I didn't have when I was depressed, is I didn't have any hope. So anger can be a very useful tool if you're really down in the dumps. It can actually get you worked up. Now, anger without action is very self-destructive. So I'm not suggesting that you just get angry. I'm suggesting you get angry enough to do something. And that's what the protesters are doing now. They're angry and they're doing something. I mean, I wish that I could go out there and protest with them. Unfortunately, I live in Arizona where COVID-19 is still on the rise, and I and my husband are both in the at-risk group. But I know that the people who are marching are feeling like, gosh, finally I get to do something about this. I've been angry about this for so long, and finally I get to do something. So just know that anger is not always a bad thing, and it's certainly much better than depression. So how do you get angry? Well, first of all, you want to just work yourself up. Get mad, get really mad, but don't stay there. Here's what I recognized when I was depressed and going into anger, is that I wanted to take action. I wanted to do something, and it felt really, really good. So what I recognized looking back, it's always easier to look back, is that I knew what I didn't want when I was angry. I knew I didn't want to be a second-class citizen just because I was female. And the protesters today, they know what they don't want. They don't want police brutality. They don't want to be judged. They don't want anyone to be judged by the color of their skin. And they don't want anyone to tell them they can't protest. And so that's what they don't want. What you want to do once you determine what it is that you don't want is turn your full attention to what you do want. What is it that you do want? And one of the things that I recognized when I look back on my years of being an angry feminist is that I spent too much time looking at what I didn't want. And don't we do that in life? You know, we marry somebody and we think they're perfect when we marry them, And then we start looking for all of the stuff that's bad about them. They don't take out the trash, or they don't read my mind when I'm sad. All of that. We're always looking for what's not working. Um, and we're getting angry about it, but we're not doing anything. So it's important to know that in order to find out what it is that you do want, sometimes you have to really look full on at what you don't want. And then you got to shift it. Now, this is more trivial, certainly, than what's happening with the protesters. I mean, that is really important stuff. And one of the things that I highly recommend, because you get more of what you focus on. That's another important lesson I learned when I was moving from being depressed to being undepressed and ultimately to happy, is that you get more of what you focus on. So I highly recommend that if you haven't stop looking at the video of the man who died and how he died. Stop looking at the murder and start looking for things like one of the videos I saw that gave me great hope is I saw two Orlando policemen meeting with some of the protesters, and they all got down on their knees and prayed together. Now that's a vision I want to hold, and that's what I want more of. That's exactly what I want more of, and I'm sure you do too. Or, there's a great picture of a police officer with his arm around one of the protesters. And there's a lot of really good images out there for you to look at, and you get more of what you focus on. So be really important about what it is that you're looking at, and what is it. Identify what is it that you want. If you're looking, for example, let's get a little more lighthearted here. If you're looking, for example, at the fact that your 16-year-old doesn't ever take out the trash when he's told, well, instead of completely focusing on that, start looking for things that he does do. And some of them he does do without asking. Things like he empties the milk, but no, I'm just kidding. But you've got to really look at things. And for me, one of the turning points for me is I remember one day I was driving down the freeway in Los Angeles. And I don't know if you've ever driven in Los Angeles, but it's pretty tough. People can be wacko. And I was paying all this attention to the people who were just, not driving safely. And then I realized what I was doing to myself. I realized that I was attracting all these nutcases to cut me off. So I started looking for the good drivers. I started looking for the good drive. And you know what? Shock. Most of the drivers are good. But do we share them? I didn't rush home and say to my husband, you know what? There were so many good drivers on the road today. No, I went home and shared with him, this jerk that cut me off, or this other guy who didn't use his directional. We do that all the time. Another time, I remember driving down the road and I saw a lot of trash on the road, and it really made me sad. And the more I looked at it, the sadder I got. And then I realized that all I had to do was lift my eyes up and look at the sky and look at the trees and look at the beauty around me and not look at the trash. Now, some people call this denial. And you know what? I'm kind of a fan of denial. I think that the more we look at what bothers us, the more what bothers us comes into our lives. And I've proven it to myself over and over again. So anger is, believe it or not, can be your friend. It's something that moves you from being down to being active, and then you want to take it. And by the way, when I say anger, when I encourage anger, I don't mean violence. I mean get angry enough to do something and watch what happens. So what can you do? I mean, it depends on the circumstances, but in this case, when we're talking about being worked up about police brutality, there's calls to be made, there are letters you can write, there are things that you can send out to your elected officials. There's all sorts of things that you can do as a means to take your anger and move it towards something positive. But when you do those calls, or when you write those letters or emails or whatever you do, don't tell them what you don't want. Tell them what you do want. Get that. One of the most powerful things you can do for other people is to help them focus on what they want. Because the more we all focus on wanting to have a world where people treat each other with respect, the more we will have that. I mean, when I saw the peaceful protests, I was just in awe. I mean, they did an aerial shot of New York, and it was just it looked like some sort of major celebration. You know, but that's probably what it looked like when World War II was over. Everybody in the street celebrating, and they weren't celebrating the death of George Floyd, certainly, but they were celebrating the fact that they were finally out and doing something and having their voices heard. So look at your anger, bless your anger, make sure that you don't stay there too long, focus on what it is that you don't want, and then turn to what it is that you do want. And watch what happens, because I have to tell you, when I first started focusing on what I'm grateful for, that's when I started pulling out of my depression. And it was a magical moment. I remember very clearly thinking, why are you focused on all this nonsense? You have so much. And you know, one of the things I was remarking to some friends of mine the other day is that I said, remember when everything that you have right now was a dream? And I'm going to ask you the same question. Remember when everything you have now was a dream? You know, I remember being a teenager and not wanting to be under the thumb of my parents. I couldn't wait to get my own apartment. And now I have my own house. I've had several apartments, and now I have my own house. I remember going into my empty refrigerator when I have an apartment and wishing that it was full of groceries. And now my refrigerator is full of groceries. So it's really important that when you look at what you don't want, then you turn to what you do want and start moving toward that. You will, my friends, if there's nothing else I can have you take away from today, is that you get more of what you focus on. So take anger, take frustration, take whatever it is, and use it to identify what you don't want, and then figure out what you do want. And what you do want, the more you think about that, the happier you'll be. So, you know, I invite you to direct message me. I have a wonderful mini workshop that I can send you about passionate self-care that takes no extra time. And I would love to send that to you. And I'm so glad that you showed up today. If you're here, if you're listening to the recording or you're live, I appreciate you. I think happiness is the best goal that you can have. And if no other goal in your life, have the goal of living happily ever after.